You're listening to The Parallel Paths, a podcast designed to elevate your mind, body, and spirit so that you can get everything you want out of life. The only question is, are you ready? Welcome back to the Parallel Paths podcast. I'm your co-host, Makita Moore.
I'm your other co-host, Blair McClendon.
And thank you all for joining us again for another episode of the podcast. This week, we are joined by Lola, and I will let her go ahead and introduce herself and tell all of you about who she is, what she does.
All right, so I go by Lola Dietitian on social media platforms. I'm a registered dietitian and nutritionist, graduated from University of Florida back in 2012. So I've been in RD for about 8 years, and I've had the pleasure of being in all kinds of spectrums of nutrition in dialysis clinics, hospitals, nursing homes, one-on-one, and most recently in the last 4 years in the wellness sector. So currently I work full-time for a private health insurance company, and I'm growing my private practice as well. So I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, so that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Awesome. First of all, go Gators.
For sure, go Gators.
We have two, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm finishing my PhD right now from UF.
Oh, nice. In what?
Clinical psychology.
Oh my gosh, this is exactly like perfectly well matched.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
much more about the mind than anything else.
Oh, so actually tell us about it, because I feel like most people don't think about nutrition in the mind. Like there's such a disconnect. Can you kind of, start off right there? Like,
oh man, that's like a plethora of information. So let's see. So there's the part of actually not understanding when you're actually satisfied, whether it's physical hunger versus emotional hunger, right? So that's the psychological part of it too, right? So not being able to even understand your body or listen to your body to actually understand, like, hey, I'm actually good. I don't need any more food, right? And the other part of it too is like having all of these different, like, how do you say, different things in like the social media atmosphere and just how we grew up and how we were raised, and we were told to follow this specific diet and follow that specific diet. And so there's like a lot of like, years and years and years of built up of like information that you think it's true, that it's not true. And then psychologically, it just messes you up. After 20 years of listening to like, you shouldn't eat carbs, you should eat carbs, you shouldn't eat fat, you should eat fat, and so that kind of messes up your mind as well. So then not being able to have that mind and gut interaction, right? So not being able to have that relationship between the mind, hey mind, like, hey gut, I'm like pretty good. And then the gut actually communicate with the mind. A lot of people lack that. Then you talk about psychological barriers as far as like how they were raised. Were you raised in a household where your mother told you have to eat everything on the plate? For Hispanics, that's a huge one, right? So we're supposed to eat, every little grain on the plate. I used to have my brothers actually eat my food because I just didn't ever want to eat when I was a kid. But a lot of us have that issue as well. And then, other really bad, like, traumas too that other people go through as well. So like if you were, in a sheltered home, or you were in a foster home and you weren't sure when your last meal was going to be, if you have that trauma, then you're going to always want to eat. You're going to hoard food and you're going to just eat until you just feel like that's your safety, your comfort. So there's just so much to nutrition when it comes to psychological that people don't understand that the way you think, period, is more than likely how it's going to affect how you eat. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
That's huge. And just from a personal experience from my own gut issues, I can definitely attest to everything that you said as far as listening to your body and knowing when you've eaten something that's not necessarily in favor of how your body should be working per se. And that could lead to issues, like let's say eating a bunch of dairy products and it's going to cause a mucus buildup. and this is just like in my own case, like as soon as I cut out dairy, I noticed I could breathe better. Like my bones, like I wasn't aching anymore. Like it was just weird. The inflammation was down. It affected so many things. And like you said, a lot of people aren't really paying attention to the signs that their body's giving them.
I agree. I agree. So yeah, the psychological part, there's a lot. So a lot of the times I'll either refer to a mental health counselor or a psychologist, if it's something that's really deep rooted, that it goes beyond my scope of practice. Most of the times I can kind of say, hey, look, like, a diet is a diet, like get over the fact of like restrictions and so forth. And, I think people trust me in that aspect. And once I gain their trust, then they're more likely to actually go with what I'm suggesting or recommending.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine it might take time for someone to hear your recommendation and then begin to see the benefits of it. And Blair kind of mentioned, and you did too, is some of that mind-body connection. So are you, is that something that you teach, is kind of like listening to how your body responds? Because diets, I mean, like what works for me might not work for Blair, might not work for you. So is that something that you teach, is kind of like more so understanding that, what's physically happening,
Yeah,
emotionally happening?
yeah. That's actually primarily a lot of it. What it is, it's like 70% of it is what it is for most people. For maybe 10% of the people that I've coached or counseled, it's for maybe 10%. It's like, hey, like this is how you kind of need to eat. For those people, they get it, they fast. It's like it's done within like maybe 3 sessions, and like they're good to go for the rest of their lives. But that's very far and few in between. Usually, people have a lot of baggage when it comes to nutrition. A lot of things that they never understood that was actually impeding in their health goals. And that's where I kind of step in to kind of be like their accountability partner to say, hey, like, these are things that are stemming from your childhood, or these are things that are stemming from maybe the way that your thought pattern is going. But yes, to answer your question, yes. So like there's an entire platform on intuitive eating. There's a huge book on it. There's dietitians. Have you heard of it? It's probably really, really popular in psychology.
I've heard of like mindful eating, where it's kind of in a sense, it's more about being present, and it's not necessarily tied to how it's affecting your body, but it's more just about being present with your food and just.
Yeah. So there's these 2 dietitians who I think like 20 years ago or something. It's been going on for 20 years. Don't like I could be wrong about the years, but they've been around for quite some time. They did a bunch of research studies, so it's evidence-based research, and they actually have a book out. It's called Intuitive Eating, and a lot of dietitians, especially the modern dietitians, we practice this. And so she goes over 10 different principles, right? And so this is kind of what I bring to the table as well, because it's not enough just to know, hey, you got to eat your fruits and vegetables. Hey, let's make half our plate vegetables. Hey, let's make these interventions dietary wise. It's really difficult to go from, knowing something and actually applying it into your life. And so that's where I step in and say, let's personalize this to you. And that's why it's so personalized. When it comes down to it, nutrition itself is multifaceted, of course, right? Different cultures, different people, different ways we grew up, and all that affects on how we eat. But when it comes down to it, it's really almost the same for everybody, right? Eat your fruits, eat your vegetables, eat your whole grains. If you decide that, maybe dairy isn't for you, it doesn't react well for your body, okay, don't do dairy. If you decide that you want to be an animal activist and you don't want to do any, animals, okay, be vegan. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be eat your fruits, eat your vegetables, eat your lean proteins, and so forth for the general basis. Now, when it comes down to the psychology aspect of it, a lot of it is about your mind and how you're thinking. And the intuitive eating book is really, really helpful for those who do have that 20 years of baggage, or even 5 years, 10 years of baggage of our whole lives of like thinking, oh, like I can't eat this, I can't eat that, right? Because that's such a psychological aspect of it. And I've worked with so many different clients on so like different extremes, right? Where they acknowledge, hey, like I have been restricting, and I do feel like a kid in a candy store that I want to eat everything because I keep restricting myself. And then there's people on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, oh, keto diet is like a lifestyle. you know, and I'm just like, like not eating carbs is not a lifestyle. Like, what are you talking about? You know? So different parts of the extreme. And then it's just, it's such a different, nutrition. Like I love being in nutrition because you do get that challenge of like, you know, different people coming to you with, you know, different aspects of the spectrum of where they're at in their lives and their health and wellness journey. But the intuitive eating book, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
I'm like talking way too much.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so the intuitive eating principles are reject the diet mentality, honor your hunger, make peace with food, challenge the food police, discover the satisfaction factor, feel your fullness, cope with your emotions with kindness, respect your body, movement, feel the difference. And then the 10th one is honor your health with gentle nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say I definitely kind of practice those just subconsciously over the past few years on different practices, from yoga to meditating and like literally sitting with your food and seeing how it feels.
Yeah.
But one thing I was going to ask is, when you're coaching or doing your consultations, how do you kind of portray the difference between a diet and a lifestyle change, and I guess the longevity of the latter?
Yeah. So when I talk to my clients, we talk about lifestyle change. So, you know, I'm a health coach and a dietitian. In my full-time job, I'm a health coach. So I definitely take a lot of different factors into consideration, and not just about diet and nutrition. Here's the thing: when we're, let's say, for example, you know, one of the things is stress management, right? So if you are highly stressed, right, for, let's say, COVID, right, because we've been going through some crazy times these years, the past year, then we have to address stress management, because a lot of the times people will have lack of sleep. Lack of sleep affects your hormones. That affects your appetite. Then that affects your diet. So it's just like a domino effect. So you kind of have to figure out what the root cause is, address that, and then eventually we'll get to nutrition. So that's kind of how it works. You know, you can't just say like, let's eat fruits and vegetables, but yet you're
Right.
here on 4 hours of sleep. It's like, that's impossible, you know? And a lot of people, you know, I think you seem to be one that's in tune with your body. You kind of understand how it works, how it functions, what it needs. You know, I am the same way, even though sometimes I don't listen to the signals that I'm getting. I think that happens to all of us.
Yeah, sometimes we need those pleasure foods though, so I get it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like Netflix for another hour. Yes, even I'm like, I should be sleeping right now.
Okay, well, yeah, not even necessarily foods, but just what we're
Yeah,
ingesting in general. So that could be anything, but
it
yeah,
could
I
be
definitely
anything.
get it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people though lack that being in tune with their bodies, and they lack the signs. And you know, partially too, it's like, you know, we're thinking about people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of socioeconomic status. So if you're talking about somebody who, for example, you know, is growing up in where they don't have access to food, or if they have access to food, it might be lack of healthy food, right? There's food deserts in America. If they are not making, you know, certain amounts of money, right, that's going to afford them shelter and food, then they're not worried about what kind of food they're eating.
Yeah.
So those are factors that, you know, I think a lot of people kind of forget about, right? You know, I grew up in a household where we had a shelter, we had food, but you know, my parents come from a third world country. So when I talk to, you know, my clients who come from, you know, not the best income status, I can relate to that because I've been there, you know. So, and I don't forget that, because it's a huge part of how you're going to be able to manage your stress, and how you're going to be able to manage nutrition and manage your household, and you know, the stresses that come from wherever they're coming from, right? Because it may not be money, it may be a relationship that you're in. And all of that, it's a domino effect, and it will eventually get to nutrition, right? So it's going back to, I think a lot of people just don't understand how these domino effects affect your life until somebody either points it out to you or like you hit rock bottom and it's like, man, how did I get to this point?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that a lot with a lot of the kids I work with is that they're in survival mode. So they're just trying to get in what they can to get through the
Yeah.
day. They're trying to numb out on Netflix or social media, and then the foods they're eating is just like they don't really care just because they're in survival mode. And when you're in survival
Hmm.
mode, you're not really caring too much about what you're ingesting. You're not really paying attention to it. How do we break that loop of kind of being in that survival um, and kind of just trying to get by, but to be able to get someone to see that that cycle they're in, they have to stop it at some point. Like they can't just keep going through that cycle. How do we get them to recognize that that cycle is detrimental and that there is space to stop it and to make a difference?
Yeah, I've thought about it that actually a lot because, I think eventually when I get to a point where I'm, not working my 40 hours a week and I'm just focusing on my private practice, eventually I do want to get into, working on my community because I think that question has a lot to do with the community around, right? Because we can educate on nutrition, we can tell them how they should be eating, but the reality of it is it's not going to stop, the fact that they don't have enough money for food or they don't have shelter or they don't have stability in their lives. And stability is everything. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So like if you don't have either the what is the first one, the shelter or
Mm-hmm.
right, then you can't really move up on the hierarchy. So that's really hard to kind of answer because it's not a one person kind of an answer. I think it's more of a
Yeah.
community thing.
And I think you kind of hit on a point too, but it's a lot of food deserts. Like I grew up in a food desert. Even now, in the same area where I grew up, there's literally one Whole Foods in probably like a 250-mile radius. And like that, other than maybe a little stand that you might find on the side of the road with some farmers or something like that, it's really not a lot of fresh food. So like you said, depending on where you grow up or where you live, it can be hard to get that access. So I think one thing we have to do from a communal perspective is also start growing our own food. Um, I think the more that we can get some of the healthier foods in front of our people and at least give them options, I think that might help as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I love the idea of the community gardens and all that because it's something that you can live off of. And I've seen them in New York too, where they do it like up on their
On the
rooftop patio.
rooftops and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they find their space. And I've tried so hard to do my own in my own little patio, and they die like every single year. I'm like, man, one of these years, I'm actually going to be able to grow something.
Yeah. I tried my first one last spring and it was outdoor. But it's just a couple things I didn't do right. Like I should have did a raised bed, but I was doing starter plants in pots. And so
Mm-hmm.
they did good for the first few months, but then we got hit with 75 tropical storms and hurricanes mixed with 110-degree heat. So it's like all of this rain and all of this heat, like it's hard to manage the plants. So when they weren't getting flooded, they were getting fried. So it was tough. I definitely need something to cover them, like a greenhouse type of shelter, but I'm gonna figure that piece out because I have to
What
get
part of
food.
Florida are you in?
I'm in the Panhandle, like
Oh, okay.
across the bay from
Right.
Destin. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's definitely a shift in I think since the pandemic started, there was like some scare about like food shortages. So I've definitely seen a lot more people investing in creating their own gardens and figuring it out. And I mean, I see my mom, she has like a huge garden, and I love seeing it just because
Yeah.
she was raised in the South, and in her generation, that baby boomer generation, they're still eating, things that I just look at, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
stuff is soul food, but it's not really good for us. And I've seen her begin that transition into a healthier lifestyle since she created her own garden. So she goes out there, she'll pick her own greens that she grew, and the food tastes different. It tastes so much
Mm-hmm.
better when it's like grown, and it's clean, and it hasn't, had to, spend days being transported in. and all this stuff. But I definitely feel like there is a shift. I think the whole pandemic and there's this greater focus on health. And actually, have you seen that? Have you seen an increase in people caring about, wanting to see a nutritionist since the pandemic started?
I think there's been a huge market for us dietitians because the pandemic brought about a lot of good opportunities for us as far as going virtual. As far as the clients that I've seen and the changes that they've made, I think they're more woke, that's for sure. I think a lot of people during this last year, they're just more aware of what they want, or they're making these like drastic changes in their lives where they're actually doing something that they've probably been, putting off for years. And then finally they're just like, okay, good. So I think a lot of people are like waking up in that sense. But nutrition wise, it depends. A lot of the clients that I talk to right now, they were just trying to manage their stress, really, because you think about people losing their jobs, they don't have the ability to pay for rent or mortgage, and it's stressful. So it's a toss up, really. There's some people who really focus on their health, and then there's other people who are just really, focusing on trying to manage their stress and trying to manage their bills and so forth. So it's a toss up.
It's tough because, like you said, all of that stuff at the beginning is kind of all connected. So it's really trying to find the balance in what works best across all planes. And I know it can be difficult for people, but you kind of alluded to it as well. I think in this time of the unknown, it's given a lot more time for people to be introspective, and that kind of gets some clarity on what they want to do or what changes they want to make. So I think it does, as cliche as it sounds, mean going within to try and get some of those answers to the questions that we're seeking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's easier because, Blair, you're kind of on your own. I'm on my own. So it's easier for us to like make decisions about our health because we're the only ones who's buying food and consuming the food.
I'm here.
But when it comes to like, having a partner and, your partner wants to eat one way and you're trying to make this change, do you see that happen a lot? Be a common barrier is that whoever's buying the food isn't?
And not a lot, but it does happen. It happens often, but I wouldn't say that's usually the barrier as to why they can't lose weight or why they can't make their health goals or whatever it is. Usually there's a way around that. So the people that I work with that come to me, usually they're already in that state of change where they're motivated to change and they're motivated to make those changes. So like, I don't have the problem with like, but if you do this, like maybe you'll, gain that. Like I don't have to convince them. I don't have to persuade them. And that's the beauty of having people come to me, right? So I'm not there waiting for them to change or waiting for them to be ready to change. They're already to make those changes. So if they have some barriers, we'll find a solution together. And they're usually more open to that. But it just depends on what stage of change they're at, if they're in that contemplative state, I'm just like, and that's why I do like pre-screenings, because I'm like, I'm not going to work with somebody who's not ready to put in the work. It has to be a mutual agreement.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot with a lot of our side groups that we do, whether it's with business or whatever. It's just having a certain level of commitment and interest in the other party before you even get started. So I commend you on that piece for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know you're a busy woman. What do you do to stay balanced?
That's a great question. Yesterday I was talking to one of my girlfriends, and she was like really grateful because I had set out this date for massage, spa day, mani-pedi kind of a thing yesterday, and I had set it out probably like 2 months in advance. And she tells me, thank you so much, because I wouldn't have done this for myself. I would have made up some excuse as to like not do it, but you planned it so far in advance that I had no excuse. And so I said, well, thank you too, because honestly, like if I don't plan these things, I will eventually burn out like I have in the past and be like, what is going on in my life? Why is my life just in a shambles right now? Like I'm getting stressed out. So for me, I have to schedule in time into my calendar, my Google Calendar, to actually take care of myself on a social spectrum, on a physical spectrum, getting my hair done, and those things. And so that's kind of what I do, is just put it into my calendar. Otherwise, it doesn't get done, and then I'm just like a hot mess trying to figure out why my life is a hot mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely feel
That's
you.
like being intentional. You have to be so intentional. And it's, unfortunate that's the society that we live in, that we have to like schedule in time to feed our spirit and to take care of ourselves because we're just so go, go, go. But that's just the society we live in. So you have to be intentional about planning in, your
Yeah.
self-care, your family time. Like I have me and my best friend, she lives in Florida. So we have like an hour that we log into our calendars every single week where we, catch up for at least an hour because we're both so busy. And we
Yeah.
realized that we were just going months without talking, and we're best friends. Um, so just becoming very intentional about it. And it's like, it seems crazy to have to plan in stuff like that. But if you don't, it's not going to get done. Like the day is going to take you everywhere.
Yeah, I think for me in my life though, like I really want it to be like I want to hustle now so that, in 3 or 5 years I'm like in a place where I don't really have to schedule in self-care, you know what I mean?
Mm.
I eventually want to have a family, like in a full household of kids, and like I'm gonna be busy. So like I don't want to have to feel like, I have to do that, right? Because I don't like being in the hustle and bustle. I want to take things easy and
Same.
relax and like be in the moment and just have my coffee, maybe like with an ocean front, like just relax,
Yes.
You paint a picture that I'll be talking about. I'm like, man, I'm just trying to own these businesses, not be
Yes.
working in them. So I feel it.
Yeah. So just for right now, it's a sacrifice that I guess I'm willing to make for right now.
Hey, Parallel Podcast listeners. If you're looking to learn more about building a strong mindset and deepening your meditation practice, join Makita every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time live on Instagram for Makita's meditation and mindset tips. You can also schedule a free consult by visiting the link in her Instagram bio at Makita Smiles. And for all things health and wellness, check out Blair's site, 3layerswellness.com, for products, services, and resources. And if you're looking to establish or enhance your business online presence, don't forget to check out thebonafideagency.com for assistance with websites, logos, graphic designs, and more. You can find all of this information in the show notes as well.
For sure. Short-term sacrifices, long-term gain. So
Yes.
it's all good.
I'm with you.
Another question I had was, what was kind of like the life-changing point, or was it a life-changing point that kind of shifted your focus to wanting to focus more on diet and nutrition?
Like as my private practice or as my career?
Well, I guess both.
Okay, so as my career, um, well, I actually wanted to go to culinary school first. I love food. I'm a big foodie. That's why I just tell people, I'm like, listen, eat what you want. Just, have some kind of a like discipline to say, hey, I'm gonna eat my fruits and vegetables and my whole grains. But I do feel like all foods do fit into a diet unless you're doing it for like, animal rights and so forth, or like, dairy, or it's not being well suited for your body. But so I went to go to culinary school, but then I got into UF, right? And I'm a Florida Opportunity Scholarship scholar. So I don't know if you're familiar with that at UF. Are you okay?
I
Were
had
you
a
in
couple of
culinary
friends who
school?
were in FOS. I
Okay.
wasn't.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to have that scholarship pay for 100% of my tuition. And they were amazing. I mean, I got that letter in the mail. I was like, what? This is crazy. Like,
That's
what?
wild.
Yeah, I honestly did not even think about how I was going to pay for school. I was like, I'm going to school, period. I don't know what's going to
Right.
happen and how I'm going to pay for it, but I didn't even think I thought about how, like, the question of like payment. I wasn't even thinking about that. So I got into UF and I was actually a business major, and I did business for about a year, and then I got into a couple of business organizations, but then But then my sister's like, you need to find a career that's actually going to give you money, like after you, graduate, because, how do you know if like business is going to pan out? And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's right. Like, and all my family was already in the healthcare field. My brother's a firefighter, my sister's an NP. So I was like, well, what can I do that's like kind of like culinary arts, like business, like, and then also, I don't have to touch patients. And so I was like, oh, dietetics. Okay, great. So I got into dietetics, and then I did my internship in South Carolina, and now I'm here. So that's kind of how I leaped into nutrition. And then as far as like private practice goes, why I decided to go that route, I think I always wanted my own business. I know I always wanted my own business. And over the years of just growing and knowing yourself, you kind of realize like what you want and how you want your life to be set up and so forth, or at least I hope we realize that, right? So I was like, I need to have more freedom. I feel like working 40 hours a week for me has never been a thing. I left UF, and UF is such a bubble. It took me like 3 years or 4 years to adjust to real life. Like after
People don't understand that I tell them. That's such a microcosm of what like a fantasy world would be.
Yeah.
Like, it was so crazy. That 4 years really makes no sense. And like, if I tell people stories, it don't even sound real.
I know.
It was so wild during that time. Like, I can't even put it into words. I know kids today aren't getting that same experience. Like, even when I visit Gainesville, it's busier. Like, it just doesn't have like the small college town feel.
I agree. I think when we left,
I don't know.
like completely shifted. But yes, I agree. So it took me a while to adjust into the real world.
Yeah, that jumps. It's wild. It really is. And that's when social media was really hitting too. Like, we graduated right on the cusp.
Facebook had just come out when we got in.
Yeah. And I think Instagram was only out for maybe like a year or two when we graduated. And it was very
small.
Low, very small. And then the whole dating scene shifted. More and more people started dating online. Like, interactions with people are different because people are used to just texting. Like, everything kind of shifted in that 2012 to 2014 range.
Yeah, I kind of miss.
We're really starting to see some effects of it now.
Yeah. Oh man, I miss those years so bad. I don't miss the studying or the hard exams, but I do miss like just being able to call up a friend and say, hey, do you want to hang out? And they're literally like 5 minutes on the road, right?
Yeah.
So what was I saying? So I needed more freedom, and I was like, I gotta do something, and I wanted my own business. I knew that for a fact, and so I was like, well, what am I good at? Obviously, nutrition is the first thing that comes to mind. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, just trying to find my own freedom.
Nice. And it sounds like, because even from when you were an undergrad and you applied to UF, you weren't even thinking about how I was going to get paid for, and then the money came. I feel like that is kind of a testament to kind of this sense of like, it's basically your sense of spirituality, like this connection, like things are going to work out, like I'm not going to stress about it. Is that something that you kind of feel like you carry through?
I honestly, I don't know what I was smoking like back when I was 18. Like, seriously, like what was I thinking? Like, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was just determined. I was just like, this is gonna happen no matter what. Like, it's gonna happen. And so I think it does come with like a sense of like spirituality, or I don't know if I would call it that back then, because I don't think I was that spiritual back then. But today, for sure, I do believe in the law of attraction, and I do believe that your thoughts become things, and like we should be very careful about what we say into the universe, or what we ask for, right? Because I've asked for some things and then those things don't pan out, and I'm just like, oh man, I should not have asked for that. But so I now I'm more spiritual for sure, and now I do believe in law of attraction and those things.
Where do you find that, because I had your vision board up before, where do you find space for that in as a health coach and a nutritionist? Like, How do you find space for that? Do you utilize that in the work that you do, the care that you provide?
The vision board, I've had a couple of clients ask me about the vision board stuff. And so I do tell them if they ask me, but sometimes that is so far out for people.
Yeah.
And so I have to meet them where they're at, right? So I'm not going to be like, hey, let's do this whole vision board thing, like I'll put it on my social media, but like some people don't, believe in that. So, I can't go that route with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 'cause that's something I teach a lot of my clients, just like in how you mentioned about like the things that you say, the stories that you're telling, like I never do this, I can, this is so hard for me. I'm really big, and it's funny because over here on the West Coast, they're a lot more open to like law of attraction, spirituality.
Yeah.
All my kids at work, they got crystals. I'm just like, what?
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
Wow.
dope.
Like they're on
That
it.
is super dope.
It's just a part of the culture out here. But I try to weave in, like I try to tell them, like, the things that you say about yourself, those are important. And it, like you said before, there is such a connection between like psychology and nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see how a lot of people do have these stories that they tell themselves, or these myths that kind of keep them stuck,
Yeah.
versus allowing
Mm-hmm.
them to meet that goal that they set.
Yeah, I definitely don't go off the board or off the, like, there's a spectrum of things, right? So like there's a spectrum of like, believers of law of attraction and like vision boards and visualization, and like I'm all for that. But then there's also the part where it's like, well, if you even look at the research, you can actually talk about positive affirmations or positive statements or a positive outlook. And there's research on that shows that having a positive outlook on life on kind of like a day-to-day basis, that it actually helps you with your health. So those kinds of things I definitely do mention.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like, let's put a vision board, like,
Yeah.
like it just depends on the person.
Uh-huh. And I always talk about like the placebo effect. I feel like the placebo effect is like one of the clearest science-based evidence of the power of the mind.
Yeah.
Is just knowing that you can get somebody a sugar pill and they start to experience
Yeah.
the benefits of a medication that they never took.
I love it. I love the mind. I wish I would have gotten like a double bachelor's degree in like psychology and nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could go back and redo it, I probably would do that too.
Right.
I feel like so much, like, and the beauty of us living in the age we live in is that we have access to so much knowledge that, a lot of the techniques that I use, I wasn't taught like in my PhD program in clinical psychology. A lot of the techniques I use are things that I've learned along the way, just, along my own personal journey.
Yeah.
And even just watching interviews and learning all these different mind hacks and all that stuff. And I use a lot of that in my coaching that I do with people versus the evidence-based treatments, that I've learned in school. So I definitely don't feel like, I mean, looking back, I'm like, would I have gone and get a PhD? It's questionable. because I really love what I do at coaching. And I feel like, that's all been like self-taught stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I do always wonder, like, could I have? But I mean, I appreciate the degree now, and also creating representation in academia.
Yes.
That matters too. And even for yourself, we don't have a lot of, Latinx people in academia. So you're creating space for that as well.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get my master's in nutrition in hopes that eventually I'll get my PhD. So, but that's probably like a 10-year goal. Just taking my time with it. I know my company right now is going to pay for my master's degree.
Oh, nice.
But you're right. I think it's more important about the representation. And even, within my own company, like I'm even trying to move up the ladder a little bit just because I'm just really tired of seeing the same people at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I even spoke with my own manager, my manager's manager, actually, my boss's boss. And I said, hey, like, I just wish there was more people that looked like me or, people of color that were at the top, because, these discussions are so important to have. A lot of people think, oh, like, you're going to get fired or like you're going to get reprimanded. And, the hope is that they're going to be receptive to it. And I knew, like, with my company or my bosses, they were receptive. So I felt comfortable in knowing that it is really difficult to have those conversations for both people, right? Like for me and for my boss, right? Because my boss is, American, white American. So it's really difficult to have those conversations. And I kind of get it on both sides of the spectrum, right? he kind of like mumbled over his words a little bit. I think he didn't realize what was coming to him at that moment in time. But I think they're important conversations. A lot of the times I see people who are like, they don't speak up, they just complain and complain and complain. But like, I think it has to be on both sides of the spectrum. Like, we got to say stuff so that they realize this isn't cool. And, you know, back and forth, right? Because they've been living their life, how they've been living their life for the last 30 years. So what differences do they, how are they going to see the difference, right? How are they going to see the change if they've never seen it before? That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, people of color, we have to recognize our value in these spaces. Like, you know, there's that sense of that imposter syndrome.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, and it's because there aren't a lot of us here yet. In order for us to serve our communities, we can't be using a model that's made from another community. Like, it's not going to translate to our community. So we have to, you know, be bold and recognize that it's bigger than ourselves. You know, when we come and step into those rooms, we're representing our entire community and working to meet the needs of our community, because, you know, these Eurocentric, you know, institutions, like, they was built to serve that society, and we're trying to manipulate it in a way that it can work for our society, but it's not all that
It's not built for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not built that way. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. We got to speak up. We got to build our own stuff in certain situations. But just keep pushing the needle for sure. And I think us continuing to be the light and examples for that, hopefully will inspire others to do the same. So
I hope so. You know, and that's kind of why I brought it up here, because I'm like, you know, I feel like, you know, we have to be better, and we have to do something different, because it's not right. And, you know, I'm just getting tired of seeing like a bunch of things. And I went for like an audit up in Minnesota, and I'd never been to Minnesota. And, you know, I was like so shocked. I was like, why are there
yeah.
Funny, because, you know, it brought me back to being back in Gainesville. I was culture shocked for the first year, and I did not realize that I was being culture shocked until like years later. I was like, wait a minute, I think I know what happened my freshman year. I felt so out of place, and, you know, people can say, oh, it's because you're a freshman in college. No, it wasn't because of that. I'm from Miami, and so I'm used to seeing, you know, Black people, Haitian people, like Hispanics, Cubans, you know, and so the minority was the white person, actually. So for me, when I went to Gainesville, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, you know, why do I feel so weird and odd and like out of place? And it wasn't until years later I was like, oh snap, like this is what happened. I was definitely culture shocked.
Yeah, and that's so important to, I know when I was in grad school, like, I joined like the Black Graduate Student Organization, and then my fellowship, they also had, like, you know, biannual, like, you know, seminars, things that we would go to, and I would be feeling so burnt out in grad school until I went to these like events where I looked around and I'm surrounded by people who look like me, because it really does take a toll on you when you are the only one. Like, even though I grew up in a predominantly white community, still going to UF and still being the only Black person in these spaces, it does take a toll on you. And we're so used to kind of shoving that down and not feeling like we should feel that way. But it does matter, and we should find ways to connect with people from within our community when we do have to step into these predominantly, you know, white, you know, rooms. So did you join any clubs or anything like that while you were at UF?
I did. I was a FOS mentor, for Opportunity Scholar mentor. I was in food science, human nutrition club. I did a bunch of stuff, random stuff at UF. And my friend joined the equestrian team just so that we could ride horses.
You did equestrian?
Yeah.
Dang, that's dope. I didn't even realize
we never got to riding horses.
Wow.
We always say this story, and I'm just like, we never got to ride a horse.
What?
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then there was a bunch of other cool clubs. I remember Gatorship was a thing, and I think the idea of Gatorship was really good. It was about diversity and inclusion. Did you guys ever do that at UF?
I didn't.
I played a lot of intramurals and I party.
What?
I did. I said I played a lot of intramurals, like flag football, basketball. I was in sport management club. I actually did Delta Sigma Pi as well. It's like a business fraternity. And
Delta Sigma Pi was at UF?
yeah.
I was in AK Psi for a little bit. That's crazy. I didn't know we had Delta Sigma Pi there.
Yeah, I had a few friends in AK Psi too. So I did that for a couple years, but I was, again, feeling like a token in a sense. I was like, yeah, this ain't for me. So by the time senior year came around, I was back on just full sport management mode. So I did a couple internships and I was involved in other areas. And then the other thing I said I did was party. So it was a nice little divvy. But
those parties were lit. I my 21st party, that was the best party I ever had. I mean, it was so lit. It got shut down so early.
yeah. Yeah, I've got a few party stories that we can share offline. But
I can't even imagine.
yeah.
I see some of, I mean, I'm a grad student, so it's different than being undergrad there, but I've seen some of the undergrad parties and that's still different than what they were like back when y'all were there because it was such like kind of a college town. Like now it's more opened up, people are, spreading out, but I can imagine, like, I know I would have had a ball, like, undergrad at UF. Like, it's nothing but work hard, party hard. Like, work you hard, and you're going to party hard after that.
That's my one regret, though, is that I don't think I partied hard enough. I feel like I partied, but it wasn't, like, every weekend kind of a thing. I should have.
For me, it honestly was, like, it sounds wild when I say it, but other people, like, my friends, they kind of give the same sentiments, but we really feel like we kind of had like an HBCU experience within a PWI, just based on our close-knit group and like the people who we hung around. So while being in that environment, and like you said, it can be overwhelming, you being a token, I never really felt that just based on my major. After I switched from pre-farm to sport management, I saw a lot more people that looked like me. Although the professors didn't look like me, they were still cool, receptive. It was more of a melting pot type of feel. And then from like a party perspective, I was always around people of color. So whether it was
party perspective, definitely always people of color.
like I'd go to Latin nights, we'd go to Asian nights, we would go to our Black events, whatever, and then we might be in Midtown. So it was really a melting pot, but everybody who was in my core group of friends kind of looked like me. So it wasn't, I didn't really feel out of place.
I had a discussion with one of my friends that graduated from accounting at UF. And she is Jamaican from Miami, half Jamaican, half Cuban. And she was telling me that, like, her like how she, looking back at her experience at UF, and I don't remember the conversation fully, so forgive me, but she was kind of saying that, like, how it was so racially divided at UF. And then when she started pointing things out, I was like, oh snap, that does make a lot of sense,
It's definitely pockets.
Huh?
I said it's definitely little pockets.
Yeah. I was like, I never saw. I was like, you're right. There are some major things that need to be worked on there, but I kind of had the same sense too, like that like if I went to Latin parties, and by the end of your third and fourth year, you kind of have your knit groups, like your like niche groups that you're like hanging out with all the time, and so I didn't feel at that point in time, but yeah, I mean, there's some things that every community has to work on as far as diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, no doubt. That I know. Excuse me. When I was applying to UF, there was it's like a summer program for, I think they call it like the African American summer program or something like that. But anyway, it would be like basically a tour and kind of like an info session over the course of a weekend, really trying to boost UF's ethnic population, let's just say. And I think it just disappeared. So for like, I know myself, when they're always hitting me up, hey, donate, donate, we're the people that look like me. Because every time I go to Gainesville, it seems like it's less and less and less. So I definitely think some things need to be done on that front across the board, whether it's Hispanic, Black, Asian, whatever, Indian, whatever you want to call it. It definitely needs to be a more diverse setting and a more of a welcoming environment when it comes to that. And I guess the one knock I would have my whole time at UF would have just been representation from a teaching perspective. I think I had two Black females, no Black males, and I think I had one Asian guy, and I think he was actually a TA. That was the only people outside of white that I had the whole time there.
I had one Latin professor, which thank God for her, because she definitely looked after me, and I'm still friends with her to this day. And she still gives me advice on, going for my PhD and so forth. Love her.
Keith, I forgot about him. I can't forget about him. So one black guy, and I still communicate with him.
I don't remember any Black professors that I had.
He's actually from Antigua, so he's not even Black American, but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember. You're right about that. So yeah, I think, Makita and I, like, going for the PhD and stuff like that, I think will bring about the representation. And, I feel like I'm trying to do a lot, in such a short amount of time, but I'm going to try, because I really want to see representation, and I do want to be, a part of that change that's going to happen in the next 15 years. If you think back 20 years ago, you see that, the people who migrated into this country, a lot of like the Latinos and Hispanics, we're now, in our 30s or, older, a little bit younger, right? So you're seeing a huge influx of Latinos, Hispanics growing into this country. And, now with, everything that happened last year, and with George Floyd and everything too, people are becoming more receptive to change their ways and their thought patterns of how they view African Americans. And so I'm hoping that in the next 15 years that we're not going to still have this discussion, and that there's actually some change that's going to happen. It's important for our kids and for future generations to come and so forth. And the question is, how do we do it? And I think our generation is much more outspoken and much more like, hey, we're going to do this. Like, F y'all, like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, our generation not playing, so.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. So what, kind of speaking about like how we make these differences and our own personal purpose, do you have like an ultimate vision for yourself in your career, or, beyond your career, that you feel like you were kind of put here to do? Is there something that you feel like
it's like a human person on this earth, right? Is that your question?
Like, yeah, like what? Because I mean, I feel like everybody, like, we have a purpose, and it does take time, to clarify what that is, or at least have some sense of a direction on what that is. So what do you feel like that is for you, and what has helped you to, I guess, kind of cultivate that and nurture that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm 31, so hopefully by the time I'm 35, I'll have a perfectly clear picture. I think that we're always evolution.
Evolving.
And so kind of like, for me, the story has gotten clearer and clearer as I age.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a good thing. But for right now, I feel like my purpose is really to just help my Latino population right now, right? Because there's a lot of, the reason why I started my private practice was because I got really sick and tired of the media in Hispanic TV and in Hispanic social media, where, we're getting misinformed. And so the kids who are growing up now in the Latino population are not the healthiest, or, could have some improvement. And a lot of it's being stemmed from what our parents taught us, what our parents taught us. And then we have the influx of social media and like craziness of like the doctors on Hispanic TVs that are giving misinformation. So I just got really irritated and really upset and just pissed off really at how bad like the information is being mainstreamed into Hispanics. So for me, that I was just like, this has to change. And, instead of getting upset over it, actually do something about it. So for me, I'm still finding my way, and I'm still finding how to express myself and how to communicate with, this population in the best way possible so that I can get this message out. And so that for me is like a big thing. I really want to be able to see a lot of changes in our communities and our Hispanic communities, being able to embrace our cultures, being able to embrace who we are as Latinos, and being able to bring our foods and not feel like we have to restrict ourselves because it's, beans or because it's rice. Like, who says that beans and rice was ever unhealthy, right?
I eat it all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, that's really what I'm striving for, is to really make those changes in our communities and actually have somewhat of like hey, like nutrition, and like this is how nutrition works, and like a doctor is here to provide my medical care and to oversee my medical care, but there's also a physical therapist who helps me with, if I get injured, or there's also a dietitian who's there to help me for nutrition. Right now, for a lot of Latinos, the way they view the healthcare system is like the doctor knows everything.
That's like our community, and I think that's one area where the Latino community and the Black community could come together for real, because it's a lot of the same issues that we're facing, and it's literally no separation with doctors lying to us, whether media lying to us, whatever it is. And I think it goes back to what both of you said, is having that representation. And for me, even with 3 layers, like same thing with you, just from being sick of the system, being like, nope, this is what I'm about to put out. This is my truth. Here it is. And at least give people the alternative to look into something different than what's being given.
Yep. Perfectly said.
Right. Well, I know the Latino community definitely appreciates the work, even if they might not fully see all that you're doing right now. But you're a trailblazer, and it's nice to, even though you had to go through all the discomforts you did getting into that field, you've created so much space for other people, and just bringing more clarity and healing to the community. That's what we're all about with this podcast, is healing. And nutrition is such a big part of that, and the way that you do it from a holistic perspective is what we really
Awesome.
need to see, versus just saying eat this, but not taking culture into context, not taking stress into context, and all these other factors that are necessary, that are needed in order to allow people to have that change. So I definitely appreciate the work that you do, because again, like our communities are so interrelated, and we have the same struggles. So definitely much appreciated.
And a lot of the times we do live in the same communities as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep,
yeah,
exactly.
and I'm glad my message was delivered. I'm so happy that I expressed myself perfectly, that you guys.
Yes, and before we wrap, well, one, are there any projects you're working on? Anything that we can support or bring more attention to, as well as if you could give us maybe some tips, some like key tips that if people were kind of like in that pre-contemplative stage, or they might not even be aware of, how that is actually their diet that's causing them depression, anxiety, or just stress in their life, or their physical problems.
You have to touch upon those. Yep, you're right. Mm-hmm.
If you could provide us some more insights on that as well.
So some tips, right? I would say I would ask yourself a question, because questions will always get you to think, versus me making a statement that I'm going to hopefully that you'll believe. So I would ask yourself a question, and ask yourself, if you could change one thing today, how would I say this? How would I phrase this? What would be your goal 5 years from now if you could change one thing today? Like what would, if you made some small change today, whether it is to increase your vegetable intake, you know, what effect would you hope that that would make in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So trying to get that, the thought of, I guess, putting something into action and what benefit you would gain in 5 years or 2 years or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then what benefit would you gain if you didn't do that? Where would you be in 5 years?
Mm. I like that approach because it teaches people to make that decision on their own versus like you telling them like, you know, you should change this, but having them
Makes you think.
yeah, it's like if I do this, where would it take me 5 years from now? If I don't do this, where would this take me? Which outcome do I want? Yeah.
It's that critical thinking question.
Yeah, because and that's the thing. It's like it's what you do on a daily basis that ultimately, you know, leads to that big outcome. And we're always thinking right now outcome, but it's like, you know, just you wake up
Things
and
like
have an
that.
apple today, an apple tomorrow, an apple, like you know, just
Yeah.
something small, like these little things you can do, and over
It
time,
builds up.
build up. Yeah.
And the second thing I would say is, which is what you just brought up right now, is just be patient with yourself because things take time. You know, it takes a lot of time for you to form a habit and for you to let go of the bad habits that you have. So we're only humans. A lot of these people try to do these 14-day diet resets or like 7-day like resets or, you know, these challenges and so forth. But realistically speaking, if you lose the weight, you'll gain it back. I guarantee you that. I'll put money on that. But realistically speaking, you know, habits take time. So being patient with yourself, being kind to yourself, and having grace for yourself, and knowing that there's going to be ups and downs. It's not going to be like a, you know, 1+1 is 2, and like A, B, C, D, E, like a mainstream kind of a thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that patience part, I feel like is so important because with social media, with the video games, we live in such like an immediate gratification society that it's like if I don't see a change tomorrow, I'm done. But it's
Right.
like it seems that you have to take more, you have to value the fact that you're making a good decision and not worry about the outcome. But just value the fact that, hey, I chose to do something good for me. I chose to do something good for me tomorrow and the day after. And eventually you will see the physical manifestations of it. It's just a
Exactly.
process you have to enjoy for now.
Exactly. And then, you know, people just put it so much based off of a number on the scale, right? I talk about health goals because it's not just about a number on the scale. It's like so many different things that we can gain from, like you said, eating an apple once a day or eating a fruit once a day, other than just like a number on the scale. So taking that pressure away can open up a bunch of great benefits, and great way of thinking of nutrition versus just like putting so much pressure um, on on the number on the scale.
Right. Yeah, I see that issue a lot with a lot of young girls. I'm like, listen, you could be 100 pounds, but it'd be unhealthy. So the number really doesn't matter. It's really about how you feel and what you're doing on a daily basis. That's what matters.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And then as far as like things that I'm working on right now, there's a bunch I'm working on. I need to like, I have a calendar of like what I need to do on what dates and stuff like that. But I'm working on a book right now. It's probably not going to come out probably till like a year from now, to be honest. There's just so much information that I have to collect and research and put together, and you know how that goes. And I am working on like a 7-day kind of a meal plan, not for weight loss purposes, just for like people to kind of see like, hey, we can include our culture in this. Let me show you how to include culture in this without giving up, you know, restrictions and or without having any restrictions and so forth. I'm working on that, so stay tuned for that. That should be coming up at the end of the month. And for later on in the future, probably like a year and a half from now, hopefully sooner though, I am going to be working on a course. I definitely want to have a course, yeah, for, you know, we kind of have to think about all kinds of peoples and all kinds of financial, you know, spectrum, right? So you know, the working one-on-one with me is going to be probably the highest priced, and then the course will probably be second to that, and then depending on what course too.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Tackling it from all layers, and I definitely it's often surprises me that even being in California and the Hispanic community being so large that there still is a lack of, resources specifically designed for this community, or even just having some of our informational packets even translated to Spanish. Like we don't even have that, and just it's so surprising. So I love the fact that you are taking these concepts and being able to, infuse the culture in there, and then also taking into consideration the big point about like socioeconomic status is going to impact people's ability to have access to certain things, and taking that into consideration. So that's going to be very powerful. I'm looking forward to all those. Yeah.
Excited, and thank you guys so much for having me on. This has been a great conversation, and it's been very easy and like at ease. I was like, oh my gosh, it's my first podcast. What am I supposed to say here?
You did amazing, and we appreciate all the knowledge that you shared and the insights, and just helping us have a better understanding of just what nutrition is, and that it isn't just this food thing. It's this whole lifestyle thing that we shouldn't be so afraid of, and that we can still honor who we are, our culture, and be healthy, despite all the misconceptions and all the myths and things that we've been told.
Very well said.
Sure. Oh, one more thing before we go. I noticed you have an incredible library. Give us, I'm not even going to ask for 3 books, just give us one book that you would recommend our listeners pick up.
I thought you were going to ask this, and how did I know? I don't know, my mind sometimes works that way, so I did have it ready.
Maybe we talked about a book here or there before.
No, I was just like, I know he's going to ask me this question for, I don't know. It's called Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain.
Creative Visualization.
It's a really fast read, but it does talk about how to manifest things in your life. And it gives you like step by step, like for people who have no idea about any of this information. So yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate that. That's not the one I thought you were going to say, or
yeah,
but it's nice.
I like that one. I like that.
I was going to say a nutrition one.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something about either like health or nutrition, or
honestly, I thought it was going to be something like maybe like Eckhart Tolle related, or maybe Joe Dispenza related, or something like that. Yeah.
And then the other one is The Power of the Subconscious Mind by, who is this guy?
So I was close.
The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Dr. What's his name?
Okay, the audiobook on that.
Joseph Murphy.
I was just gonna say, I know I've listened to that one on audio. I don't think I have it.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I've listened to it though. Yeah, it is a good one.
See, that's beautiful. The fact that you are taking in this type of information, because I just know there's a way to infuse it into health and the work that you do, and it's like your clients are good. They're in good hands.
For sure.
Very good hands.
For sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, Letta, again, we appreciate the time, and let the people know where they can find you. And yeah.
Okay, yes. So my Instagram is at Lola Dietitian, LOLA Dietitian with a T, not a C. TikTok as well is at Lola Dietitian, and YouTube is also at Lola Dietitian as well. So I have like 3 videos on there. So if y'all want to go let me know.
Beautiful. I love that you're making the information accessible on all these different platforms. All right. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, and my website. My website is loladietitian.com as well.
Okay. And we're going to put all of these links and everything in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, don't worry about it. We're going to put all that stuff in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us, and really just kind of giving us a window into your world, and a direction on where we can go and where our listeners can go on really just improving our health holistically. So we definitely appreciate it and wish you all the best in all the endeavors, the books and the courses and everything that you're working on. Sydney, definitely.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for the support. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, Parallel Podcast listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Until next time. Peace.